So I'm proud to present Myriam Dunn Cavelty. She's a senior lecturer for security studies and deputy for research and teaching at the Center for Security Studies. She studied international relations, history, and international law at the University of Zurich. In addition to her teaching, research, and publishing activities, she advises governments, international institutions, and companies in the areas of cybersecurity, cyber warfare, critical infrastructure, protection, and risk analysis and strategic foresight. Today, she will tell us something about cybersecurity politics. And I hand over to you, Myriam. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anna. Thanks for the organizers for organizing this great event. Sadly, we're all online, so hopefully this will be repeated sometime soon so that we can all meet face to face and have a drink together. That would be lovely. I'm actually struck by how much my presentation and Monica's presentation overlap. So bear with me if I repeat many things that she already said. Maybe that shows you that a lot of what we are saying is true. I am now going to share my screen to be able to, give you a bit of background about what I call cybersecurity politics. And I think what I want to stress is not only my personal journey here. I just calculated that I've been doing cybersecurity research for 20 years by now, which is a bit of a shock to me. But I think I really want to also stress how important it is to combine different types of knowledges. Now, I am going to talk about the combination of technical and political knowledge, but I think Monica has already shown quite nicely that there are also other knowledges, if you so want, that you need to have to do well in something that is not purely technical. Who am I? You already heard Anna say a few words just to outline, other things in an identity of a person. And I find that useful also, to sometimes sit back and think about who am I and where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? And what makes me get up in the morning. So I do have many different identities, and depending on what I'm doing in my job, but also outside of my job, some of them come to the fore. I'm also a mother, and let's see whether we have time or not, but I think one of the things to discuss is really work-life balance in any field of any professional field, but definitely also in cybersecurity. There's a lot of things that we're wanted for, and how can we balance everything well. I am, as you heard, a senior scientist at ETH Zurich, a senior lecturer. I'm at the department DGES, which is the social sciences department. We do teach for all the other departments, though, and I'll say a few words about that because that is also a very important aspect of what I do. You see here that I do not have a technical background. I'll also say a few words about what I think we should know, though, about technical things if we kind of move in the field that I am moving in. And when I prepared for this, for me, it was very important to realize, 20 years is a long time. Many people do change careers. I have not. I've really built a very special profile driven mainly by a fascination which never stops, because the digital realm is constantly changing. The threats that arise or the challenges that arise from it are constantly changing. The influence on society is changing. So it never ends. And if you can keep this curiosity or the passion, if you so want, you'll be happy in your job. And I think that for me has always been super important. What do I want? I do hope that I am also able to shape a digital future that we want. So this is not about just letting technologies do things with us, but really thinking about how can we shape it? How can we move into a world that, is a world that we really want? What have I achieved in 20 years of doing cyber related things? Now, first of all, research. This is very special. There are not many research positions in Switzerland that deal with cybersecurity politics. I am mainly using political science methods and theories to do my work. There is a bit more in the US, a bit more also in the UK, but also worldwide. This is an emergent field. So I was lucky, I guess, to be there from the beginning, and I've been able to shape this field. You know, and it's always great to have students come to me also afterwards, basically the alumni, but also people from other countries that write me emails telling me how important my work has been for theirs. Then teaching, I already mentioned that. Teaching is obviously something that many, you know, positions allow you to do. I like that Monica also outlined, you know, the awareness raising, etc. But we also obviously teach other students. And here we are now in a position to actually lecture about the political aspects of cybersecurity, also to the technical people at ETH, which is a great advancement, I would say, because so far it's been very tech focused, and now we're really adding the policy, the politics aspect for a broad range of different students. I also teach the military officers of Switzerland, which is another achievement that is now also part of the core curriculum, so that all of them learn about the politics of cybersecurity during their studies. And the third and potentially most important or the most diverse kind of pillar is the bridge building. Monica also said building bridges, talking to others, etc. But being an expert that can be called upon for, you know, for public knowledge or like talks, also media, but also for policy advice is something that has helped me a lot to understand the different interconnections also between the society, IT, businesses, etc. So through being an expert that builds bridges, I also learn a lot all the time. And that I think is also absolutely crucial, that you stay on the ball, that you know, keep an eye on what is changing around us. So it should have become obvious that cybersecurity in my world is definitely not about fixing the IT infrastructure, but is about interactions between technology and social actors. So what cybersecurity means shifts depending on whom you talk to, depending on who you advise, depending on you know, what you write about. So it is not just one thing. It can be many different things, and one of the challenges is to you know, be able to talk to different stakeholders in ways that are useful for them. Now a definition. You know, we academics, we love definitions, and I could lecture for hours here, which I'm not going to do because I'm not given hours, but I think it will help me to highlight the most important types of knowledge that I think I need or people in my field need. So first of all, it's about threats, but it is not only about the hacker. It's not only about the vulnerabilities and the tools that are used, but it's also about the contexts. So in my world, in my research field, it's about the political or strategic use of digital technologies. You know, the examples, I'm sure you know many of them. Stuxnet, for example, obviously a key example. Or also the DNC hacks, these kind of things where it becomes a security political topic. That is what we are interested in, and in understanding, you know, what those contexts are, what the actors want, the intentions, etc., etc. And the second part is just as important. That's the responses. And you see here, it's a fairly complex definition, if you so want, because for me, the response is really also about interactions between different stakeholders, because very often there is no agreement in what the right response is. So you see here states, but it's also the state's bureaucracies that are not always aligned. You know, if you have the military intel on the one hand side, and more business-oriented or resilience-oriented bureaucratic units on the other side, it's not always exactly the same that they want with regards to the cyber infrastructure. Then society, also hugely diverse, you know, civil society, different ideas also about what security should be or how much security there should be, and obviously the private sector. And it is really about the relationship between those and about the responsibilities and the roles that they should take. And this is also, or has been changing forever. This is not stable. Constantly, if something, a new threat arises, there is another discussion on the response level. What else should be done? What is not working? Should there be more regulation? Should there be new laws, etc., etc., etc.? So many different type of questions can be asked here, which is great. So it never gets boring. I just wanted to briefly, go through some of the relevant questions to again tie it to knowledge, if you so want. What type of knowledge do we need to be able to move in this field? So if it's about the political strategic use of digital technologies by state and non-state actors, then the context, as I mentioned, is very important. So to understand, here it says power political context. Who are the actors? What do we know about them? Why do they act the way they do? Sometimes we can only guess, obviously, but with political science knowledge, you can understand contexts in which certain actions become more or less likely. Then other questions are obviously also how are those technologies used? Also, maybe why are they used like this in this particular point in time? Then many questions about the actors, which is close to what intelligence units would also do. But we political scientists also try to go beyond the knowledge that somebody in the intel community would be interested in and set it into a broader context. The capabilities, of course. So what can they do? Why? I already mentioned that. And one super important point here is the question of how can we actually know about them, or what do we know and where does this knowledge come from? Cybersecurity is a field where the market is exploding. You have many specialized companies like threat intel companies that produce a very particular type of knowledge in this field. And it is already quite apparent that, well, first of all, they sell a lot of their knowledge, so it's not open source. And a lot of the knowledge that is produced is already very politicized because a lot of those companies are in the US, and there are just certain blank spots even where we simply do not know what is going on in other parts of the world because we don't have access to primary data. And for us academics, that is interesting, and it is obviously also interesting for other stakeholders. So this is something that we're working on. It's also about attribution, obviously, how can academia play a role in attribution to make it fair and also transparent in some ways that we can actually trust. If somebody points to a particular actor and says it was whoever they say it was. So that is one of the bigger problems we are facing in my field. And obviously also the question of who has which capabilities, but will they actually use them? So what is the risk that they actually pose? Are there certain restrictions, norms maybe, behavioral norms that might lead them to not use certain technologies in certain contexts, even though they could? Here you have a debate also about, critical infrastructures in states, because we know that certain states have the capabilities to damage critical infrastructures of other states. But there's only very, very, very few cases. So why is that? Why are they not using it? And here again, you need the political or the security political context to understand. The response is, as I said, fairly complex, and there's many things happening. You can focus on the national level. You can focus on one of the sectors, for example, the private sector. Here you can focus on small, medium-sized enterprises, or, for example, insurance companies, etc. So many different diverse lenses are possible to have, pose interesting questions. Obviously here as well, who are the relevant stakeholders? What are their interests? Also, who has power, if you so want, to shape the field? Also very interesting are the questions of where is there an alignment of interests and where do they clash? Because those are, you know, the fields where there's just, let's say it's more interesting to find solutions. Also cost benefits of certain solutions. One big topic here is obviously regulation, you know, more regulation in certain sectors. What would that mean? Or duty to notify, how would that change, you know, the whole ecosystem? These kind of questions. Also, obviously, always the question of what kind of security do we want? Is it the national security, or is it, you know, the more business continuity type of security that we're interested in? Or do we understand security as something that, you know, each and every individual should have? So more like IT security type of security. And these securities are not the same. So we need to understand how different actors form different ideas about these concepts. And obviously also who wins and who loses depending on what kind of solution we are focusing on. These are just a few examples, you know, of questions that we're looking at. Obviously, we're not looking at all of them. There is not enough time and far too many very interesting questions to answer. Skills you need. Now, I listed 8 here. I think there's more, but and as I mentioned, a lot of them were already mentioned by Monica. So one of the most interesting things, and it really echoes with what she said, is that you need to understand different contexts. Now, you cannot be an expert in 5, 6, 7, 8, you know, different fields. It's not possible for a human being. So the way to do it is to do it in teams, to actually have an ability to talk to people. And I guess that is basically already my second point, or the other yellow box at the bottom. You need to find people that can help you understand certain things that you have identified as important for your job. That's a different sort of skill that we not necessarily learn, you know, during studies, or not even necessarily on the job. So that is a very important ability, also to listen to people, which would be the second box. Not only talking is important, communication is super important in this field, but to listen to other stakeholders and understand what they're saying, because they might use the same vocabulary that you use, but they might mean different things. And that happens frequently if you say cybersecurity, and many other, you know, they might, you know, have a completely different definition in their heads. So the ability to listen, and then when you speak, tailor your messages. There is not one message that, you know, reaches everybody. So I deal a lot with the military or the intel services. You need to have a different type of language almost, especially also when you write it down, but even in speaking than when you speak to students. And I think nobody's perfect from the beginning, so it takes a bit of experience. But again, also maybe asking feedback from people, you know, if you have this opportunity to, did you think I addressed your concerns the right way? Did we understand each other, etc. Then very important, the next 2 boxes on the top row. So know how policy works. And Monica also said that, she called it the political system. Here in my field, you need to understand the national, domestic, the Swiss system, but also the international. You have to understand what diplomacy is, what, you know, happens when heads of states talk together, but also what happens when intel services exchange information, etc. A lot of this information is not written down in books. It's also, you might have to gain it through colleagues, through other people that are professionals in these fields, or through conferences. So a lot of the knowledge also comes from, you know, going to events, not during COVID, but normally a lot of, you know, events would also be held in this realm, and you could meet very interesting people there. Then you also need to know how the business world works, like many different parts of business, obviously. and also by talking to people. There is no other way. There is so many implicit knowledge around. But again, if you want to understand what it means to work as an IT security professional, or if you want to understand how a hack is done, then talk to people that you know this in depth. It's a shortcut almost, because you will not get the relevant knowledge through books only. Another part, that's the blue box for me, is creativity. I think it's something we don't often associate with cyber issues or IT security or technical issues. But in a field that is constantly changing, creativity is super important. So it's seeing interesting questions, but really also be able to offer creative solutions. And this is obviously not always, possible in the same way. It depends a little bit on the where you work, obviously, or what your position is. But I see my job as very creative, and that is also what actually I like about it, because there's an aspect of being able to push the boundaries of knowledge, which is also one of the points I have here. Curiosity, I mentioned that, and thirst for learning new things. Monica mentioned it as well. It never stands still. And this is not only the technical, it's also the political, the whole social, the feeling, what is going on in social media, etc. So I think you need to have and a curiosity there that keeps you interested in the field. And it can be overwhelming, but I don't think you need to answer all the questions. So it's good to know what you're mainly interested in, and then, focus on that particular aspect. Knack for interdisciplinarity. In academia, that is very important, but also hard, because we are all usually drilled to be specialists, especially if you do a PhD, you become a specialist in a very narrow field. But in cybersecurity, you have to be interdisciplinary, not necessarily in your work, but in your interests. You have to push the boundaries of knowledge, and you have to be able to fuse different types of knowledge, for example, technical and political knowledge. I don't think you need to be able to program yourself. It's certainly good to know how it works. I do think, though, you need in-depth knowledge of how hackers and IT professionals think and work, of their practices, to be able to have a very solid understanding of this world and what is actually possible through different technologies. For example, there used to be these ideas in the early 2000s that, you could, almost like a weapon, you could deliver a cyber weapon and boom, something would blow up. And people did not realize how long it actually takes to get into a system, and, how difficult it is to actually get a very targeted effect. And that took a while for the strategists to, talk to the techies, if you so want, to understand that it's, that's hard work. Hacking takes a lot of time and can be very boring and can be very solitary. Because this is a Women in Cyber event, I also gave some thought to what it meant for me in my 20 years of being a woman in cyber. And to be honest, very often it didn't matter whether I was a woman or not. There are some challenges, I will outline them below, but I often found it very enriching to be able to see worlds that I would not otherwise have seen. I mentioned military and in the intelligence world, also the geek world of IT security, of the hackers. I never felt that I wasn't welcome, but I would also echo Monica's point that women have to do a bit more, prove themselves in the beginning, especially if you're young, so that you're, so that people take you seriously. But once you are an expert and you're a woman, you can be sure that you get far too many invitations to far too many events because of your gender. So that's I don't know whether that's the up or the downside. Another point that I have noticed, because I also recruit at the Center for Security Studies. So whenever I'm looking for senior scientists, and this is not only for cybersecurity, I also take part in this. And I'm pretty sure that I could pick from, a blind, without photos, without name, that I could easily spot women's versus men's application. Because women tend to understate their worth, all of them. It's in the language. And I think in a world like cyber, especially if you come up against the geeks, the IT security experts, the security guys, be it military or IT, you have to, believe in your own worth and show it. Don't, hide behind what usually is a great, knowledge. And I think that is something that women should learn, cyber or not, something that I have seen often. Sometimes you're tested, especially by the techies. Monica also mentioned that. Does this person actually know things? If you do, you pass the test and then you are welcomed into the community. And I think that's also the case in other fields. And one thing that I would like to end with, that I would really encourage everybody, try and find a mentor in whatever field you are, whatever field you want to go into. If it's not offered, write to people, especially in cyber security. People are very open and ready, to help. And it can be a man or a woman. I mean, there's been men and women in my life that have helped me, that have inspired me. But I think this proactive reaching out to somebody and saying, hey, can you maybe give me tips? Can you help me, etc., is something that we should get better in and can do better.
Thank you, Myriam. That was very interesting. So we have 3 minutes left. So my first question is, how and when did you become interested in cybersecurity and cybersecurity politics in particular? I think you must have been you must have decided to go into this direction when you were at a very young age. What was happening then?
Yeah, so I'm not a digital generation. You can guess my age. So I actually, when I started university, we still wrote on paper, and then came that the time where the internet became a thing, and that was the time I started to get interested in connections between policy and also the cyber world. But the one event that really got me into the topic was the Kosovo conflict, 1998, because the Americans and NATO were actually testing doctrine at the time. And there was a lot of debate about, the first internet war, etc. And that's when I got interested and I stayed, because the field, there were always times when I thought, oh my God, I need to do something else. But I never got rid of the cyber, and I'm glad, because there were always new things happening that needed explanation. So that was also a bit of luck, I guess, but driven by interest and, looking at the world and picking an issue that I thought was particularly interesting.
Thank you. That sounds like you're really fascinated by the field.
Yes.
Thanks again, Myriam, and see you later.